Good morning and welcome to the Core Connection. My name is Mira Rubin, and today's topic is vulnerability. And we get to look at what vulnerability means and whether it is a sign of strength or weakness, or how it relates to intimacy, all kinds of wonderful dimensions that we can take this conversation into. Good morning, Rosalind. Welcome. So before we get started, let's take a minute or two to get present, and let's take a deep breath in through your nose and hold it. And imagine clean, crisp oxygen flooding into your lungs and flowing into your bloodstream and nourishing all your cells and your organs and bringing vital life energy to your body and being. And as you exhale any tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's take another deep breath in through your nose and hold it. This time, imagine brilliant, bright light lighting you up from the inside out and lighting up all your electrons and molecules and illuminating and energizing your cells and radiating out into the world beyond. And as you exhale any remaining tension, stress, negativity, fatigue. And now let's just gently press our palms together and very softly rub your fingers against your palms to feel the deliciousness of that sensation and the tickling and the tingling and the softness, and bring yourselves present right here, right now. Welcome. So we get to talk about vulnerability, and I did my nerd thing, which is to go to the dictionary and get a definition for us. And so, because we talk about being vulnerable and how we're afraid to be vulnerable, and also how vulnerability opens channels of communication and connection and intimacy. So let's just read the dictionary definition. It says, the number one definition is openness to attack or hurt, either physically or in other ways, susceptibility. So if we show our vulnerabilities, we're exposing ourselves to danger, according to the dictionary. And then the next definition is willingness to show emotion or to allow one's weakness to be seen or known, willingness to risk being hurt or attacked. So I think this is interesting. The way that the dictionary puts it is to show emotion or allow one's weakness to be seen or known, as though showing emotion is a weakness. So, I find it so fascinating to be looking at the assumptions that we just receive and embody culturally. Like if you're emotional, that's weakness. Fortunately, we get to be reassessing that equation more and more as we cultivate a greater and greater respect for the feminine, and because emotions are typically historically associated with weakness and women, right? And fortunately, we're having a greater and greater conversation about the strength in vulnerability, the strength in being present, in taking ownership of our emotions, and it's not seen, it's seen as more and more human rather than a failing of the weaker sex. I mean, all these crazy characterizations that have been that we've been indoctrinated to, and that are kind of foundational in so much of our culture. And I find it, so I was going to say the word inculcated, and it popped into my head, and I wasn't sure of the definition. So I looked it up to make sure that I got the right definition. So vocabulary word, inculcate, to implant by repeated statement or admonition, to teach persistently and earnestly, to cause or influence someone to accept an idea or feeling. Good morning, Jennifer. So good to have you here with us. So yes, these ideas about emotion and vulnerability and weakness, and the association with women and females with all those elements, we have inculcated our culture. We have been on the receiving end of that kind of programming culturally for centuries, I guess, and we're making some progress. Good morning, Andrea. So good to have you here with us. We're making some progress, but I think it's really interesting to be looking at how the definition of vulnerability is talking about weakness and exposing our weaknesses. And I see this beautiful transition in languaging that's happening more and more, where we talk about authenticity and being able to be present to our emotions and to communicate our emotions effectively, to have a degree of emotional intelligence, and to not be denying our emotional experience and toughing it out, but rather finding a wealth of wisdom and resource in our emotions and our vulnerabilities. I think that there's tremendous strength in vulnerability. And I know that, sharing our deepest secrets can make us feel exposed. The thing is that when we share our deepest secrets, first of all, I don't advise sharing your deepest secrets unless you're willing to not have them be secrets anymore. But when we are able to interact with our deepest secrets, to bring them to light and to own them, and to lose the shame or heal the shame or disappointment or regret or whatever the attendant emotions are, then what we're doing is we're strengthening ourselves, we're healing ourselves, we're emboldening and empowering ourselves rather than exposing ourselves to hurt. It's like, yes, you tell someone something intimate about yourself, potentially that person could use that information against you. However, if you have ownership of that information, then that vulnerability in terms of weakness or susceptibility to hurt is no longer at play, because it's like, yeah, that's how it was, that's how I felt, that's part of how I what I've gone through and grown through. And if somebody then throws it back at you, that's on them, right? It's a reflection of who they are and their perspective. And if you've already taken ownership of whatever that incident was or whatever that perspective was, then it's not a point of weakness, it's a point of strength, to be owning yourself, your history, your experience, your emotions, and to not be having expectations of others that they are going to treat things treat things tenderly necessarily. When I think that there's there's a difference that sometimes vulnerability is weakness in that perhaps we are not just exposing our emotions, but exposing our weaknesses. And then if we're doing that, then we get to know that other people may not respect the boundaries that we have, or the sensitivity that we have. And Jennifer says, that's exactly what I was going to say. They see a reflection of what they need to work through. Exactly. So, perhaps if you say, this and this and this about yourself, and somebody throws it back at you, there are ways to, I guess, meter our own healing, our own wholeness, because if we're I'm just thinking, there's a polarity to this. So there are times where we do expose our weaknesses as weaknesses, maybe as vulnerabilities in the traditional sense, where we're feeling very raw and kind of like an open wound, and then the way that someone else responds to us can really have a damaging impact. And there is a level of trust that is at play by sharing those vulnerabilities. Right now, the question is, who's the trust in? Is the trust in the other person that they're going to be responding to that information in an appropriate way? That's an expectation, right? Is I'm expecting somebody to, perhaps I'm trusting them, and perhaps I'm expecting them to respond appropriately to a disclosure or a display of vulnerability, sensitivity. And then there's also the scenario where we might be exposing things that we've kept secret that we're now taking ownership of. And as we take full ownership of these aspects of ourselves, it's ironic in a way that by exposing that vulnerability, in air quotes, we become stronger. We become, in a way, less vulnerable, less vulnerable to hurt, and being vulnerable in that we're being authentic. So I guess what I'm playing with here in my mind, and I'm guessing you're kind of playing along with me here, is looking at what is the distinction between vulnerability and authenticity. And is vulnerability, I don't think we can say that vulnerability is overall necessarily a positive thing or a negative thing. I think when we are being authentic, I think that there's a level of vulnerability there. I'm wondering if, like, vulnerability can be the door to intimacy, right? And authenticity can be the door to intimacy. And of course, vulnerability, when expressed, when we're expressing things that we're very raw about, it's not necessarily prudent to walk around as an open wound, right? if you're going to be that candid, that vulnerable, that raw and real, it probably behooves you to be discriminating about the circumstances and environments for doing that. And it's really interesting. The reason that this conversation came about today is on the tail of the conversation from yesterday, which was about letting love in. And I had a conversation with a friend and client about this, and the thing that came up initially about letting love in. Good morning, Bernadette. I want to check in with you to make sure you got the ebook. I did send it, and I just want to make sure you received it. Anyway, letting love in. So this friend's response was, well, that's opening up a world of hurt, and I think the reason that so many of us perhaps make ourselves wall ourselves off from receiving love and adoration is the many traumatic situations that we've encountered around giving and receiving love. And I think that the allowing yourself to receive love, to really receive that you might be loved and adored and cherished, is allowing for a level of vulnerability. So glad, Bernadette. Thank you. I'm glad you received it. So for anybody else who's interested, we've talked a lot about purpose and mission, and that we've all come here for a very special purpose that's unique to us. And I did write a little ebook about how to, it's called Your Inner Success Blueprint, 5 Keys to Discovering What You Were Born to Do. And you can download it from my website at yourcoreconnection.com. There's a tab that says Blueprint. And if you sign up for the email list, then it'll send. If you sign up to have it sent to you, it'll put you on the email list. Anyway, so Rosalind says vulnerability can be a threat or perceived challenge that needs to be make others be aware of, that you need to make others be aware of. Authenticity is expressing self and not caring as much what the recourse or reaction could be. So I appreciate that distinction. So vulnerability can be a threat or perceived challenge or perceived danger. It's like I'm vulnerable to attack. That's how the definition was put in the dictionary. And authenticity is expressing yourself and not caring as much what the recourse or reaction could be. Well, I think that there's a layer of vulnerability people are now talking about being vulnerable as being authentic. And I think you make a really good point, Rosalind, that they're not synonymous. Vulnerability is where we risk getting hurt. And the thing is, in love and receiving love, even receiving love, let alone giving love, but in receiving love, we kind of make ourselves vulnerable. And I think it's a really interesting dynamic. Bernadette says, I worry about being so independent for so long now. I don't even know if a partner needs to be walked. What? Let me just read this again. I worry about being so independent for so long now. I don't even know if a partner needs to be walked. LOL. That's funny. So I think you're a pet person, I'm guessing. And so am I, and I have been independent and for pretty much my whole life, intermittent relationships, short term here and there. And what I have been noticing just over the past few days, and this is why we had the conversation yesterday, is that there is a part of me that just doesn't even, or hadn't, before I've done all this work that I've been doing, hadn't really had the capacity to imagine that I could be loved, adored, and cherished, and to really receive that. Like if I were loved, adored, and cherished, to be feeling that. And there, I think in that step, to actually feel that experience, there is a vulnerability. There is an opening to allow that experience. Jennifer says, I needed this today. Being vulnerable as to be authentic is something I've been working on. I'm so grateful for you in this program. Thank you so much, Jennifer. I'm so grateful you're here to join us and that this was the right thing for you to hear today. So yeah, I think that, it's interesting because I've looked at myself over my life in terms of patterns and behaviors, and I can share deep dynamics with people, be very authentic, and at the same time, the intimacy of that doesn't leave me feeling weakened or susceptible, or vulnerable to attack. I think that there's a difference between being vulnerable to emotion versus vulnerable to attack. And it's a limitation perhaps of maybe my understanding, but I think it may be a limitation of our language in that the word vulnerability, I don't know of another word, maybe intimacy. I don't know of another word necessarily that allows us to be exposed and be strengthened by that. So I do hear people talking about being vulnerable as a source of strength rather than a source of weakness, but the word itself is a bit of a confusion if we're trying to use it in that way, right? Because we talk about system vulnerabilities, where are the flaws, where are the weaknesses, where are the places that other things could encroach. Elaine says, being truly authentic and living through a state of vulnerability, it's truly trusting the God self, living without fear. So I see that too, Elaine, being in alignment and being able to be vulnerable and authentic without being endangered. I think that, so Elaine goes on to say, truly knowing you are love, and you are love, and it is not to be given or taken. Where we are in this know of knowledge, maybe, of being love will reflect back to go deeper, to let go of all beliefs that I need something outside myself to complete me or to love me. That is a never-ending search, that when one is ready to come home to the heart and remembers they are love itself, this is for me. So I think what you're talking about is the epitome, right? Where we experience ourselves as love. We're lacking nothing, we're needing nothing. We are a pure expression of that love. And the beliefs that we're not whole fall away, that we are complete and whole in and of ourselves. So beautiful, beautiful, Elaine. Thank you so much for sharing that. And when we are in that place, uh, we're not subject to harm. We become, I hate to say this, we become invulnerable in our vulnerability. It's a very confusing word, because I think we are culturally more and more looking at changing the definition. And Elaine says, yes, and we don't place the expectation on someone else to fill that up inside, because they can't. And that's a really great observation. When we're empty inside, nobody can fill that emptiness. It's up to us to do that. And we may be doing that by projecting on someone else, or interpreting their presence, their gifts, whatever, as filling up this space inside. But the thing is that if indeed that dynamic is what's experienced, it's typically short-lived. And really, the wholeness and the fullness comes from within ourselves. So, but that's not to say that there aren't people that we resonate with more than others. And that's not to say that there aren't people that we can have a level of intimacy with that isn't extraordinary or exceptional. I don't believe that we necessarily can have the same degree of connection and sharing with everybody. At least that's not my experience. Maybe that's an expression of my limitation, but that's my experience, that different people resonate with different people more fully. Anyway, thank you as always for engaging in these wonderful conversations. I love everything you guys have to say. Bernadette says, I feel love all around me and I feel I can give love, but have a very hard time accepting it for myself without being too independent. I have yet to find someone who will unpack the independence without being felt they are not needed. And so Bernadette, I love that you feel love all around you and that you can give it. And when you say very hard time accepting it for yourself without being too independent, well, you say too independent, and that's by whose judgment? But also, I wonder if there's some insight to be available to you as you look more deeply at the need for, what is it about the independence? Like, what's underlying that? Is it coming from a place of wholeness? Is it coming from a place of fear? Bye, Jennifer. Thank you so much for being here. I wonder if the independence, this is what I was talking about yesterday, is letting love in. It can be really scary to let love in and to be vulnerable in that way. And I think I'm trying to figure out what is that dynamic of that vulnerability that is making it so potentially threatening to let that love in. And yet I really appreciate that you can love someone without needing them. And so I'm not talking about dependence. I'm wondering about connection. This is such a nuanced conversation. So interesting. Elaine says we can invite others to join us in the love that we are with ourselves, or we invite someone to join us and the lack of luck, expecting them to give it, or expecting me to fill them up, which is the dance a lot, too, but it's an illusion of separation. I have to see if I can dissect that a little bit more. We can invite others to join us in the love that we are with ourselves, or we invite someone to join us in the lack of I think you're saying the lack of love, expecting them to give it or expecting me to fill them up, which is the dance a lot too, but is an illusion of separation. Yes, thank you. So there's a lot of navigating there, right? To be whole and to be in relationship. I guess what does it mean to be in a romantic relationship with the give and take and being whole and being present for one another? And so it's definitely a dance. Rosalind says, if I let someone in, then my perceived challenge I have is to choose between passion or safe. Safe is being alone and settling, and intimate passion, I'm not sure can be sustained. That's been a recurring challenge for me. So this is a really rich and deep conversation for sure. So passion or safety, that's an interesting thing. You know, what can we have a balanced like a whole love within ourselves and still have passion? It's very interesting. And what does the safety look like? You know, is letting in somebody else's love for us. What is that like? What does it feel like? Interesting. And I can say this is challenging for me as well. And Bernadette says, not feeling a partnership in life. It comes with expectations that make me feel I can do it myself. So managing other people's, so what I'm hearing is expectations, disappointment, safety, independence. I think it's really, really interesting for us to be looking at how these things connect. And so, oh, Lisa, I tried to reach out to you on Facebook, but there are multiple Lisa Phillips. So if you would be so kind as to DM me, I would be thrilled. And then we could get into a Maggie conversation if the offer is still open. But anyway, Lisa says, I was in a safe relationship, but it gets awful lonely. Yes. So what makes it safe is that we wall ourselves off from each other, right? We wall ourselves off from really receiving love or really feeling love and really feeling that connection. And it can be awful lonely, right? Elaine says, if we live in the belief that we're lacking love, we seek outside ourselves for love. I think that your point is well taken, Elaine. And there's a place where we where we give and receive love, like where we share love with another. And I don't know that the capacity to share love is equal between all people, you know, like where there's a commonality, where there's a kinship, where there's a partnership or an affinity, you know, where there are many commonalities. Elaine says, when you feel the true innocent love that you are, no fear is present. I think that that's 100% true. And I'm wondering what happens in the context of the dynamic in a relationship, right? What is going on? So Lisa says, this week I'm in a vacation with a new relationship. We're about to go whale watching in Cape May. What a treat. How cool is that? And here we are talking about relationships. So relationships, love, vulnerability, intimacy. And I think the thing that makes us play it safe is having been so hurt in our pasts. And we withhold love, and we also wall off our ability to receive and experience love. And I think this is very different from feeling the wholeness of the innocent love that we are. Like when we're able to be present to that, we can really be present with others without any expectation or demand or request or yearning or, you know, desire. There's a wholeness there. And what of passion? So maybe we get to talk about that tomorrow. So Elaine says, relationships are a beautiful way to remember who you are by waking you up. And yes, sometimes it's painful and fearful. And so that's really what we're talking about, is what's going on with that. So tomorrow, maybe the topic will be relationship. I guess we'll see. But this is a week of exploring the dynamics of love and who knows what else. So I just want to thank you again. Bernadette says, looking for someone who has a jackhammer to break those walls down and stay for the duration. I gotcha. Well, the thing is that we get to break the walls down. Even if they're there with the jackhammer, we get to allow them access, So it's so interesting because we have this image of walls and I had an image yesterday of a super secure safe with these big metal hydraulic doors, and somebody else had an image of a boulder in front of a cave, blocking off the cave. Elaine says, try gentle kindness and they will melt. Well, I think that when we are by ourselves, relying upon ourselves, that we have an ability to allow ourselves to experience love for others. I think what we're talking about here is the parts that in a relationship can become painful or fearful, and the way that we protect ourselves around that. So take care, Lisa. Have a ball. It sounds great. And I'm going to wrap it up for this morning. This has been awesome. Thank you. And I'm Mira Rubin. This is the Core Connection. And I go live each weekday morning here on the Enlightened World Network Facebook page. Please check out the other awesome programming on Enlightened World Living and EWN One with the Earth, and of course, Enlightened World Network. And until next time, love yourself, allow yourself to receive the love that is lavished on you by others.